In this video, you will be exploring the 4th grade module. First, log in to your Project Lead the Way account. Once you're logged in, go to your courses. Once you're in your courses, you're going to scroll down, and remember you can choose to view your courses as icons or as a list. And you're going to scroll down to 4th grade to view all the different module options. Once you've found the 4th grade modules, you're going to find the module for energy conversion. You will see the student course in Spanish, the teacher guide, and the teacher guide in Spanish. I'd like you to click on the conversion teacher guide. Once you're in the teacher guide, you're going to scroll through and notice that it takes 10 instructional hours. Every Project Lead the Way module only takes 10 hours to complete with your class for the whole school year. You'll scroll through the items that we went through during concept assignment number 1 and 2. I'm going to pause at resources, your framework, your standards, your family letter, and different items that we have explored together are located here, just as a refresher. How to prepare, and I want us to go to professional development. In our professional development section, we have our launch pad. Your launch pad takes you back to your professional development that you're going through right now in your course. So anything that you want to view again from this professional development will be located always in your launch pad. Where I want us to spend time today is accessing energy conversion module specific PD resources. For our concept assignment number 4, all that we need to do is dive into our module so we can begin teaching it with our class. The first thing that pops up is your launch pad, and then here's your specific PD resources. These 2 resources you can view and read through on your own. But I do want us to go through building your understanding conversion of energy part 1 together.
The first presentation in this Conservation of Energy series is designed to deepen your understanding of the law of conservation of energy. This fundamental law of science forms a basis for understanding the 2 energy modules. The law of conservation of energy states that the energy in an isolated system remains constant. There are 2 terms in this sentence that need to be defined: isolated system and constant. First, let's consider the term constant. Constant means staying the same or not changing. What this means with respect to the law of conservation of energy is that the magnitude or the amount of energy in a system never changes, at least within an isolated system. And if the amount of energy in a system does not change, then we know that energy is never created and energy is never destroyed. Energy within an isolated system can only be converted from one form of energy to another. Let's look at an example system. Think about a toy car rolling down an incline. Many students believe that energy is created as a result of an activity like releasing a toy car on an inclined track. This misconception often stems from the false belief that an object has energy only when it's moving. So students may incorrectly believe that this toy car has no energy at the top of the incline, but that energy is created as the car rolls down the hill. However, this isn't true. An object can possess energy simply due to its position, even if it's not moving. Because gravity acts on this toy car and the car is positioned above the ground at the top of the track incline, it has gravitational potential energy. As long as the car is positioned above the floor, Even if it's not moving, it has stored energy. We just can't see the potential energy. Once the car is released, the stored gravitational potential energy is converted to motion. We call the energy associated with motion kinetic energy. We often say that energy is lost because energy is converted to a form of energy that we can't see or don't recognize. Many people mistakenly believe that energy is used up and disappears. But in most cases, the energy that we see, like the energy associated with motion, is converted to energy we can't see, like thermal energy caused by friction. In the case of this toy car, the kinetic energy is converted to thermal energy associated with wind resistance and friction as it moves across the floor. As a result, the car slows down and eventually stops. We'll talk more about gravitational potential energy, kinetic energy, and thermal energy in later presentations. To review, the law of conservation of energy states that the energy in an isolated system remains constant. That means that even though we may not see or recognize the form of energy in a system, we know the energy we do see, like the energy of motion, does not just appear. That energy must come from another form of energy, like the gravitational potential energy in the toy car. And we know that energy is not destroyed. If an object stops moving, the once present kinetic energy has been converted to another form of energy, like thermal energy. In the next presentation of this series, we'll explain the term isolated system as it applies to the law of conservation of energy.
When a video is finished, I wanted to remind you that a video or a PDF is just opened in a new tab. So do not press the back button, just go back to the other tab where your course is open. In our PD resources, there is additional PD resources. We will have our modules for conversion here. Activity 1.
Welcome to part 1 of the Energy Conversion Professional Development Series. This is the first of a 5-part PD series designed to provide a step-by-step guide for implementation, as well as the knowledge and skills background necessary to successfully lead your students through the module. The 5 parts of the series are designed to align with the learning events found in the module. For the Energy Conversion module, this series is set up as follows. Part 1 presents resources for Activity 1, What is Energy Conversion? In Part 2, we explore Activity 2, Energy Conversion in Action. Part 3 guides you through Activity 3, Light Up Your World. In Part 4, you will dive into the project Harnessing Energy. Finally, Part 5 provides training for facilitating the problem for the module, Food Pantry Design. In part 1 of this training, we will explore the introduction to the module as well as Activity 1, What is Energy Conversion? The design problem for this module will be introduced to students through a fictional story in which Susie, Milo, and Angelina consider ways to use their knowledge of energy conversion to solve a problem at a food pantry. In this activity, students will explore types of energy and energy conversion as they begin to develop knowledge and skills that will be useful in designing a solution to the problem. In part 1 of this professional development series, we will look at both the content and facilitation of Activity 1. You will need the teacher resources document as we work through this activity. Before you proceed, read through part 1 of this detailed plan to get an overview of the learning experience. The learning goals for this activity are listed in the teacher resources document. By the end of this activity, students will be able to explain what happens at each step of the design process, state questions that engineers may ask when gathering information about a situation people want to change, identify the differences between invention and innovation, and list examples in which energy is converted between potential and kinetic energy. Prior to working through this activity with your students, you will need to confirm that all Inventor Publisher files for this module have been downloaded from your course and added to the Inventor Publisher tablet application. These files will be used to build the bike, the generator, and the pulley models. View the Inventor Publisher section of this professional development series to learn how to set up and use these models. When you have finished downloading the necessary files and are ready to proceed, continue with this presentation. Students are introduced to the problem in the module by reading a fictional story about 3 elementary characters. Locate this introduction in your curriculum and take time to preview the ebook. As the 3 characters ride the bus to the food pantry, they discuss how the food will be unloaded when they arrive. Their conversation includes a discussion about energy conversion. Angelina, Milo, and Susie brainstorm ideas for how the boxes could be moved from the truck into the building. The story ends with a question posed for students. What ideas do you have for designing a way to unload boxes at a community food pantry? What do you already know that could help you design a solution? What do you need to know? Guide students as they discuss the problem and how it relates both to the fictional story and the concept of energy. This discussion will establish the purpose for the activities, project, and problem for this module. Students will develop skills and knowledge that will help them as they develop a solution to the food pantry design problem. As directed in the day-by-day plans, you will lead a discussion around the question of where to start when facing a challenge. Review the design process as a step-by-step method for solving problems. You will also introduce the launch log as a place to record all work for this module, including brainstorming ideas, sketches, and other written work as assigned. In addition to the teacher resources document, you will need to reference Activity 1, What is Energy Conversion, as we work through the procedures for this activity. When students select the icon for this activity, a short introduction to the activity is provided to set the purpose for the learning experience. You may have students read the introduction individually, in groups, or as a class. Read the introduction now and consider how you can use this shared reading experience not only to introduce the activity, but also to gauge student understanding of potential energy, kinetic energy, and energy conversions prior to the learning experience. Remember that uncovering misconceptions prior to new learning is good practice. These early discussions provide opportunities for formative assessment that can be beneficial as you plan for addressing misconceptions throughout the module. Let's examine the equipment list before we look at the activity. To be prepared to facilitate this learning experience with your students, you will work through the activity to gain hands-on experience with the procedures. At this time, you will need to gather the materials listed on the equipment list and make sure that all applications are installed on the tablet. Now that you have gathered the equipment needed for this activity, let's examine the procedures. In part 1 of the procedure, students will begin by selecting the Energy Review icon on a tablet in order to review potential and kinetic energy. You will now view this Energy Review presentation.
Welcome to the Potential and Kinetic Energy Review. Observe the car. Can you see kinetic energy displayed by this car? When and where is the potential energy stored? And what energy conversion occurs as the car rolls back and forth? Remember that potential energy is stored energy, and often energy of position. In this example, the higher the car, the greater the potential energy. Also remember that kinetic energy is energy of motion, and the faster an object moves, the more kinetic energy it has. In a day of your life, when do you display kinetic energy, and when do you demonstrate the greatest amount of it?
After reviewing these energy concepts, student groups will explore the classroom to find examples of the following: high potential energy, low potential energy, high kinetic energy, low kinetic energy. As students search for and identify examples, guide them to provide evidence for their selections. Allow the groups to take photographs of the examples using the camera app on a tablet. Students are directed to create and label examples in Poplet Lite. Guide students to include an explanation for their choices. This activity allows students to demonstrate their understanding of potential and kinetic energy. Provide times for students to share and discuss the examples of these types of energy. In the equipment list for this activity, you will see materials listed that are specifically for building the Kinetican. This device will be used to demonstrate the conversion from kinetic energy to potential energy and back. After you have constructed your own Kinetican, you will determine if this will be a demonstration for students or if students will build their own device. Use the following presentation to guide you as you build your Kinetican and develop the skills needed to facilitate your students later in building theirs. After you have constructed your Kinetican, give it a test and think about how you can best use this in your classroom.
Welcome to the Kinetican Construction Guide. It will help you to learn how to build your Kinetican and help your students build theirs. Can you see kinetic energy displayed by this can? When and where is the potential energy stored? And what energy conversion occurs as the can rolls back to you? Here we have some basic tools: a hammer, needle nose pliers, a 5/16 18 3/4 inch bolt, and 3 nuts of the same size, a small and large paper clip, a rubber band that needs to be somewhat flexible. This one is a number 32 3.5 inch rubber band, a nail, some cellophane tape, and your favorite 12-ounce can. The first step is to punch a hole in the bottom of the can. Turn the can over, center the nail, and give it a light tap with the hammer. That creates a small hole in the bottom. And then, depending on the size of the nail you use, you may need to enlarge the hole after the next step. That can easily be done using your needle nose pliers. You can see how easily this enlarges the hole. Now we want to create a hook using a large paper clip. We will use this to pull the rubber band through the can. Open the paper clip to make it straight, and use the needle nose pliers to make a hook on the end. The hook needs to pass through the hole in the bottom of the can we made earlier. If it does not fit, you may need to enlarge that hole a little more. Our next step is to prepare our bolt and rubber band. Take the bolt and tighten one nut on it. Then place the rubber band around the bolt and wrap it around a second time. While holding the rubber band snug, spin on the other 2 nuts, making sure to tighten each of them. This acts as a counterweight energy absorbing system inside the can. Our next step is to attach and thread the rubber band through the can. Begin by folding the rubber band in half, leaving you with 2 loops. Take one of the loops and catch it on the flip top of the can. We will need to catch the other loop on our hook to pull it through. So insert your paperclip hook through the hole in the bottom of the can and out the opening at the top. Catch the other loop and then pull the hook and rubber band back out the bottom of the can. You may need to feed the bolt through the opening, and you may need to tip up the flip top to get it in. Once you have the rubber band out of the bottom of the can, you will take the small paper clip and catch the rubber band on it, and then remove the hook. Like so. Our last step is to flatten down the paper clip. And then secure it with some cellophane tape so that it cannot rotate. Then it's ready to go. When this is hanging inside the can, the counterweight needs to be heavy enough that it is separated from the other side of the rubber band, and it also does not touch the inside of the can. If your bolt touches the side of the can, you can wind the rubber band around the flip top to tighten it. As the can is rolled, the kinetic energy is transferred to the rubber band, and when the can stops, the rubber band releases its stored or potential energy and causes the can to reverse again, displaying kinetic energy.
After observing the actions of the kinetic can when it is rolled across a flat surface, students will respond to the following in the launch log. Describe the actions of the kinetic can. How does this demonstrate potential and kinetic energy? This activity is a fun way for students to explore potential and kinetic energy. The conversations and written responses can be used to assess their conceptual understanding. In Part 3, students reflect on human energy sources and how energy from food is converted to usable energy. Through this activity, students will develop an understanding that energy in food is stored as potential energy. It is released as kinetic energy when converted for uses such as contracting muscles or generating heat. Students start this activity by making a list of the foods they have eaten so far today. They will then consider what benefits the food provides after it is eaten. Guide students to talk about the type of energy conversion that they believe is illustrated as food is converted to other types of energy. In Part 4 of Activity 1, students will construct a model of a stationary bicycle from VEX IQ components. This device will be used to demonstrate the conversion of human chemical energy to mechanical energy. Remember that the building guide is installed on the Autodesk Inventor Publisher app. Read and follow the procedures in Part 4 to construct the model of the bicycle. After building and trying this bicycle model, students will consider the following questions. How is this similar to a bicycle you have ridden? How is it different? How do the similarities and differences affect how this model will perform? What is the connection between the food you eat, as described in Part 3, and the reason why you can use your bike. As students complete each activity, project, or problem, conclusion questions are posed to bring together the knowledge and skills that have been developed. These questions also encourage students to further their thinking or provide an opportunity to consider another application for their learning. Student responses to conclusion questions provide an opportunity for you to assess understanding of concepts and areas that need more exploration. You can determine if students will record answers to these conclusion questions in their launch log or submit answers to the LMS using the Canvas app. Conclusion questions may also be used for class discussions. Essential questions are included in the teacher resources document and include questions that ask students to think beyond just the activity to bigger picture ideas. These questions should be posed throughout the module as students explore energy conversion. As you prepare to facilitate this activity with your students, you will want to consider several issues. Number one, will students build a kinetic can or just view the demonstration? Number two, if students build their own kinetic can, what preparations will you need to make ahead of time? Would parent volunteers be available to help? Number three, how will you ensure that all files have been downloaded and installed in the Autodesk Inventor Publisher app? How will you introduce this app to your students? Number four, how will you organize and group students for working with VEX IQ equipment? Congratulations on completing part one of the Energy Conversion Professional Development Series. It is suggested that you work through all 5 parts of this PD series prior to starting this module with your students. You may now proceed to part 2.
Now that we have finished the video explaining how to implement Activity 1, let's check out our teacher guide and let's look at the student course. Once you get into your teacher guide, you're going to go to Activity 1. Remember that you can use your library off to the left. Here are your launch logs to access, to print off and make copies. They're just blank pages. But this is where it's located. Let me see, resources, that's the main thing, is the launch logs there. For activity 1, it's going to take 120 minutes, so you're going to need to implement this over more than one day. As we scroll through, talks about what the students are going to do in part 1 that you saw in your video, has the energy review presentation is in the curriculum for the students, and you can view it here. For part 2, it's the kinetic can. Preparation instructions are located here as well as in the student curriculum. And then it's important to know that there's a Fusion 360 link in the student course. There's 2 different options, and I'm going to show you those in a second. Another thing I wanted to point out is that there are questions in step 8. And this can either be a class discussion or have students write down their responses in their launch logs. It's important to note that once the bike is assembled, you're going to keep it intact and save it because you're going to use it later on. In the student course, this is what the students will be seeing. In order for students to access their Project Lead the Way curriculum, they're going to use Clever. I have already arranged for PowerSchool, your classroom in PowerSchool, to be linked to Clever. Once you have started your professional development with me, it will allow me to assign you your grade level. So once students log in, this is what it'll look like for them. They'll click on Activity 1. and it starts with a story. This story does not have the option for an audiobook. In the younger grades, it does, but from third grade on, it does not. So you will read this out loud with your class as a whole group. Once you're done with your introduction story, you'll go through the procedures. I really like how they have vocabulary for students in here. Video and audio for the vocabulary. Here's the Kinetic building guide for your students. And remember that you can have your students build these, or you can have them pre-built prior to. And then here's what I wanted to point out. Fusion 360 directions on your device. Select bicycle in Fusion 360. So I'll click on that in a second. This is what the bicycle, the final assembly, will look like. Okay. Once the Fusion 360 loads for your students, you can move it around. You can do a top view, a bottom view, side view, front view, back view, and there's different tools down here. You could pan an object, you could zoom into an object. I think those are the main ones that you would be using. And then right here is where it has the animation for you. I want the assembly steps. So I'm going to click that. Sometimes it takes a long time to load. Hopefully not for you. Once you have the assembly steps loaded, you just press play down here, and you can guide students to pause it at any time. It's kind of a yucky view right now. Pause and do what the video's done, and then press play to continue. Pause. Okay, done with that. If Fusion 360 is acting up for you and it's glitching and not working properly, guide the students in their course to go to the left side of their library, and you can see right here it says Bike Video Resource. Bike Video Resource. So this right here is a video of the bike being assembled. It does not glitch. You might just want to use this, but it's cool to try to expose them to Fusion 360. Let me skip through the different steps. Step 3, so you can see all the pieces coming together as they would see in Fusion 360, and they just pause and play as they build their bike. All right, let's move on to activity 2. Now that you have finished your professional development for activity 1, you've toured the student course as well as the teacher guide. You are now going to, on your own, go through each activity at a time. I'm not going to lie, it does take a while. So this segment of our training probably is about 30 minutes. And I would allow yourself at least 30 minutes for each activity video to go through. So I suggest diving in with activity 1, get started, and give yourself some time to plan for activity 2 by watching the video, exploring the course as we just did now, and move forward that way. This will conclude your training for your 4th grade module. And now, if you have any questions, feel free to contact me. But you are done with your concept assignment number 4.